Have you ever felt like you're running on a treadmill, constantly chasing something, but never really getting anywhere? Maybe it's approval from others, the next big promotion, or that perfect relationship that always seems just out of reach. You pour your energy into the pursuit, thinking, this time it'll be different, only to end up drained, disappointed, or worse, wondering why none of it fills the emptiness you're trying to soothe. If that resonates, you're not alone. In a world that glorifies hustle, obsession, and relentless ambition, we've been conditioned to believe that more validation, more success, more control will finally make us happy. But what if the secret to lasting fulfillment isn't about chasing at all? What if the answer lies in an ancient philosophy that teaches us how to stop chasing and start living with unshakable purpose and peace? That's where Stoicism comes in. Forget the outdated stereotype of emotionless robot. Stoicism is about clarity, not coldness. It's a 2,000-year-old mindset toolkit designed to help you navigate life's chaos without losing yourself in the chase. The Stoics knew something we've forgotten, that running after externals, whether it's praise, possessions, or perfection, only leaves us exhausted and enslaved to things we can't fully control. But here's the good news: you can step off that treadmill today. By mastering a handful of timeless Stoic moves, you'll learn how to redirect that frantic energy inward where real power lies. Imagine waking up each day grounded in your values, unfazed by others' opinions, and content with what you have, not because you've given up, but because you've tapped into a deeper kind of strength. In this video, we're diving into 25 Stoic moves that will transform the way you approach everything from ambition to relationships. These aren't abstract theories. They're battle-tested strategies used by emperors, artists, and modern-day leaders to break free from the cycle of chasing and start thriving on their own terms. You'll discover how to silence the noise of comparison, find joy in the present moment, and cultivate a resilience that doesn't depend on external validation. This isn't about settling, it's about reclaiming your freedom. So if you're ready to trade exhaustion for empowerment and chasing for true contentment, let's begin. The first and most fundamental Stoic move is understanding what truly belongs to you, what you can control, and letting go of everything else. This is the core of the Stoic dichotomy of control, a simple but life-changing idea that cuts through the noise of endless chasing. Picture this: you spend hours crafting the perfect social media post, waiting for likes and comments to validate your effort. Or you obsess over a promotion, tying your self-worth to an outcome decided by someone else's opinion. In both cases, you're pouring energy into things outside your command, setting yourself up for frustration. The Stoics recognized this trap centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's the key. Your actions, your choices, your values, these are yours. Everything else, noise. Take approval. Chasing it is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how many compliments you collect, the craving never stops because you've tied your worth to something fleeting and external, but self-respect. That's built on choices only you control. Did you act with integrity today? Did you challenge yourself to grow? These are the questions that matter. External validation comes and goes, but internal grounding stays. Think of it like sailing. You can't control the wind, the opinions of others, the whims of luck, even the outcomes of your hard work. But you can adjust your sails, your effort, your attitude, how you respond when things don't go your way. The moment you stop fighting the wind and start mastering your sails, you stop chasing and start living. This isn't passivity, it's focus. The athlete can't control the referee's call, but they can control their training. The artist can't force applause, but they can hone their craft. Redirect that energy inward, and suddenly, you're no longer exhausted by the chase, you're empowered by the work that's truly yours. Here's the practice. Next time you catch yourself stressing over something outside your control, a rude comment, a missed opportunity, pause, ask, is this mine to change? If not, release it. If it is, act. This single habit, repeated, builds a life of clarity and freedom. No more chasing shadows, just steady, purposeful steps forward. What if the very things we run from, failure, rejection, loss, could actually set us free? That's the radical wisdom behind the Stoics' second move, negative visualization. At first glance, picturing worst-case scenarios might sound like pessimism, but the Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it's one of the most liberating tools for breaking the cycle of fear-driven chasing. Here's why. When we obsess over a goal, whether it's a dream job, a perfect relationship, or social approval, we're often terrified of losing it. That fear tightens our grip, turning the pursuit into a desperate scramble. But Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, offered a counterintuitive solution. Rehearse them in your mind: exile, torture, war, shipwreck, all the terms of human tragedy. By deliberately imagining the worst, you strip it of its power to haunt you. Take rejection, for example. Suppose you're terrified of asking for a raise or confessing your feelings to someone. That fear might paralyze you, or worse, drive you to overcompensate, people please, or settle for less. But now, play out the worst-case scenario in vivid detail. What if they say no? What if you're humiliated? The Stoics would argue, you're still here, you'd adapt, you'd survive, and suddenly, that looming monster of rejection shrinks to human size. This isn't about expecting disaster, it's about realizing you can handle it. That shift changes everything. The magic lies in detachment. When you repeatedly confront your fears in your mind, you stop seeing outcomes as life or death. A musician terrified of botching a performance might chase perfection until their hands shake. But after visualizing a failed audition, hearing the silence, feeling the shame, they often discover something surprising. The world doesn't end. The applause they craved loses its addictive grip, and they play not for validation but for the love of the music. Seneca took this further. He advised his friend Lucilius to live as if everything he owned, his home, his status, even his loved ones, were already on loan from fate. Enjoy them as things not your own, he wrote. This isn't morbid, it's a recipe for gratitude and presence. When you stop clinging to externals, you stop chasing their illusions. Ever notice how water slips through your fingers when you grip it tightly, but cups gently in your palms when you relax? Negative visualization works the same way. Try this for 1 week. Spend 5 minutes each morning imagining the loss of what you're chasing. If it's career success, picture starting over. If it's a relationship, envision walking away. Notice the tension rise, then watch it fade as you realize you'd still have yourself, your values, your ability to begin again. That's the Stoic secret. The tighter we chase, the more life eludes us. But when we loosen our grasp, we find everything we were running after was already within reach. Let's talk about comfort, or rather, the illusion of it. We live in a world that's engineered to make life easier. Temperature-controlled homes, endless entertainment at our fingertips, food delivered with a tap. But here's the paradox: the more we chase comfort, the weaker our resilience becomes. The Stoics saw this coming 2,000 years ago. Their solution: voluntary discomfort. This isn't about punishing yourself. It's about training your mind to resist the siren call of perpetual ease, so you stop chasing it like a mirage. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it bluntly: difficulties show what men are. He didn't mean we should seek suffering for its own sake, but that deliberately stepping into discomfort by choice fortifies us against the storms we can't control. Think of it like a mental vaccine. A tiny, controlled dose of hardship builds antibodies against the fear of lack. When you willingly embrace cold showers, skip the snooze button, or fast for a day, you're not just building discipline, you're proving to yourself that comfort is optional, not mandatory. Modern life is full of examples. Take digital detoxes. The average person checks their phone dozens of times a day, chasing dopamine hits from notifications. But what happens when you voluntarily unplug? At first, it feels like withdrawal, restlessness, boredom, even anxiety. But soon, something shifts. You rediscover the taste of a meal without distraction, the depth of a conversation without interruption. By choosing the discomfort of missing out, you break the cycle of compulsive chasing. Or consider physical training. Navy SEAL don't wait for war to test their limits. They voluntarily push themselves in training so exhaustion and stress lose their power to break them. The Stoic version might be simpler: sleeping on the floor occasionally, walking in the rain without complaint, or eating a modest meal when you could indulge. These small acts remind you, you are not a prisoner of your cravings. The deeper lesson here is about agency. When you chase comfort, you hand the reins to external conditions, the perfect mattress, the ideal climate, the constant approval of others. But when you voluntarily embrace discomfort, you reclaim ownership of your peace. Seneca practiced this by wearing rough clothing and sleeping on a hard bed, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember, I can be happy with less. That's the freedom this Stoic move offers. You're no longer running from discomfort, you're mastering it. Here's how to start. Pick one small, voluntary challenge this week. Leave your phone at home for an afternoon. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, or drink your coffee black. Notice the initial resistance, then the quiet triumph when you realize you're fine without the crutch. That's the moment you stop chasing comfort and start discovering strength. Ever hit a wall and felt like the universe was working against you? Maybe you were passed over for a promotion, ghosted by someone you trusted, or blindsided by a setback you never saw coming. Most of us instinctively rage against these moments, seeing them as unfair, demoralizing, or even personal. But the Stoics flipped this script entirely. They called it amor fati, the love of fate, not just accepting obstacles but embracing them as hidden invitations to grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire plagued by wars and betrayals, wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the heart of this fourth Stoic move. Every rejection, delay, or failure isn't a blockade. It's a detour to something better if you have the eyes to see it. Consider how society conditions us to chase winning. Social media glorifies overnight success, effortless relationships, and painless transformations. But what if the real advantage lies in the struggles we avoid? The athlete who avoids injury by skipping hard training misses the resilience built through strain. The entrepreneur who panics at rejection never learns the creativity born from constraints. The Stoics recognized this centuries ago. Obstacles aren't just setbacks, they're the raw material for becoming who you're meant to be. Take rejection. Most people chase approval like it's oxygen, bending themselves into pretzels to avoid criticism. But what if that no is actually a gift? J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter manuscript was rejected by 12 publishers. Instead of crumbling, she used the feedback to refine her work, and the rest is history. Or think of Thomas Edison, who famously reframed thousands of failed experiments, saying, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." The difference wasn't luck, it was mindset. They practiced amor fati without knowing the term. Here's the twist: the Stoics didn't just tolerate hardship, they actively sought its lessons. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, he didn't waste energy lamenting injustice. He asked, "What is this here to teach me?" Maybe patience, maybe discernment. Maybe the courage to trust again, but wisely. This shift turns obstacles into coaches. A delayed flight becomes time to read. A broken relationship reveals boundaries you ignored. Even illness can teach the value of health you once took for granted. Modern life worships frictionless success, but nature tells a different story. A muscle grows only through resistance. A forest fire clears dead wood so new seeds can sprout. The Stoics understood that adversity isn't the exception, it's the curriculum. So next time you face a setback, pause and ask, how could this be the exact thing I need right now? Not as a platitude, but as a genuine challenge to dig deeper. The obstacle isn't in your way, it is the way, and that changes everything. There's a peculiar madness in thinking that happiness lies just beyond the next purchase, the next achievement, the next like on your latest post. We chase these things like children running after soap bubbles, grasping, only to find our hands empty again. The Stoics saw this pattern long before the age of flash sales and social media comparison traps. Epictetus, who taught philosophy while living in a simple hut, put it starkly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's the fifth Stoic move, limiting your desires, not because you're depriving yourself, but because you're freeing yourself. Consider how modern life inflames our cravings. Advertisers don't sell products, they sell dissatisfaction. Your phone isn't just a tool, it's a slot machine designed to keep you pulling the lever for hits of dopamine. Even fitness trackers can twist into anxiety machines, turning health into another thing to chase obsessively. The Stoic antidote, deliberately shrinking the menu of what you desire. Imagine standing in a grocery store, hungry, surrounded by endless options. The more you crave, the harder it is to choose, and the less you enjoy what you finally pick. Now picture walking in with a short, intentional list. The paradox: you leave more satisfied, not less. Epictetus warned against inflaming desires, poking at them like a fire until they rage out of control. His student Aurelius recorded this lesson: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and clueless. That's the radical shift. Most of us chase status symbols, fancy titles, luxury brands, because we fear being overlooked. But the Stoic asks, what if you didn't need those things to feel worthy? The entrepreneur chasing a second million might scoff at someone content with a modest income, until stress-induced ulcers land them in the hospital. Meanwhile, the person who chose enough sleeps soundly. History whispers this truth through its quietest heroes. Take Diogenes, who lived in a barrel and owned nothing but a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking water with cupped hands and threw even that away. When Alexander the Great, the richest man in the world, asked what he could do for him, Diogenes simply replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." The conqueror reportedly walked away muttering, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Here's the punchline: Diogenes wasn't lacking. Alexander was. His endless conquests were proof. This isn't about austerity for its own sake. It's about auditing your desires to ask, does this serve my peace or steal it? The latest gadget might thrill you for a week, until the next model drops and the cycle resets, but morning walks, deep conversations, or time to read, these cost little and nourish endlessly. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, flourishing by aligning your wants with what truly sustains you. Try this experiment for 1 week. Track how often you say, "I want." Then categorize those wants. How many are survival? How many are social scripts? You might find your needs are mostly borrowed from culture, from peers, from algorithms designed to keep you hungry. Now practice Epictetus' art of cutting desire off at the root, not by force but by asking, what would happen if I never got this? Often you'll find the answer is, you'd be just fine. Maybe better, because every desire you prune is space reclaimed for breath, for presence, for the simple joys that don't demand chasing. Imagine being handed a remote control that could turn off the opinions of everyone around you. No more anxiety about what they think, no more craving their approval. That's essentially what the Stoics did for themselves through their sixth move, cultivating indifference to external praise. Not apathy, mind you, but a profound shift in where you place your worth. The Stoic hero Cotto the Younger embodied this. While most politicians scrambled for popularity, Cotto wore shabby clothes, ignored flattery, and even slept on the ground to remind himself that his character, not public applause, defined him. When critics mocked him, he replied, "I take no account of the opinion of those who don't even approve of themselves." That's the kind of unshakable confidence that comes when you stop chasing validation and start living by your own compass. Now contrast this with the modern addiction to likes and shares. Social media has turned approval into a currency. We post, refresh, and obsess over metrics as if they were verdicts on our worth. But here's the brutal truth: external praise is as reliable as weather. One day you're trending, the next you're forgotten. The Stoics saw this volatility centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius warned, "It's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They are inescapable. Just try to escape your own." In other words, the only opinion you can control is your own judgment of your actions. This isn't about rejecting kindness or constructive feedback. It's about disentangling your sense of self from the ever-shifting tides of external judgment. Think of a tree. It doesn't strain to hear applause when it grows tall or crumble when no one notices its blossoms. It simply does what it's meant to do: grow season after season, regardless of who's watching. That's the Stoic ideal, acting virtuously not for the standing ovation, but because integrity is its own reward. The practical power here: freedom. When you stop outsourcing your self-worth to others, you reclaim the pen to your life story. The artist creates for the joy of expression, not the gallery's praise. The parent raises children with values, not for bragging rights. Even in failure, there's dignity in knowing you stayed true to your principles. Seneca put it bluntly, "What's the point of fearing public disapproval if you're seeking self-approval?" Try this reframe. Next time you feel the pull of external validation, whether it's a milestone post or a hesitant apology for being yourself, pause. Ask, would I still do this if no one would ever know? If the answer is yes, you're acting from integrity. If not, you might be chasing shadows. Over time, this practice builds a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be fed by applause because it's rooted in something far more enduring: the unshakable knowledge that you're living on your own terms. Death is the one appointment we all keep but rarely discuss. The seventh Stoic move, Memento Mori, remember you must die, sounds morbid at first glance. But beneath its stark surface lies an unexpected liberation, the urgent clarity that comes from staring life's finiteness in the face. Seneca, who watched Rome's elite chase wealth and status while numbing themselves to time's passage, wrote this piercing line: "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We postpone joy for hypothetical futures, trade precious hours for hollow validations, and clutter our days chasing things that won't matter when our last breath comes. The Stoics didn't see death as a threat, they saw it as the ultimate accountability partner. Consider how differently we'd live if we carried this awareness lightly. That petty argument with a coworker, the grudges we nurse, the opportunities we delay because we're afraid of embarrassment, death laughs at these hesitations. Steve Jobs, who faced mortality earlier than most, famously said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." He wasn't echoing the Stoics by accident. When the clock is visible, every yes becomes intentional, every no unapologetic. The practice is simple but transformative. Roman generals celebrating triumphs had a slave whisper in their ear, "Look behind you, remember you are mortal." You don't need a servant for this, just a daily pause. Try journaling one question each morning. If today were my last, would I still do what I'm about to do? Not as a grim fantasy, but as a filter for truth. The meeting you're dreading, the apology you're postponing, the creative project you've shelved for someday, a death strips away the excuses. Here's the paradox: embracing mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. The Japanese have a concept called yujin, the profound, mysterious beauty of realizing how fleeting everything is. Cherry blossoms are cherished precisely because they bloom so briefly. Your first love, your child's laughter, even the struggles that shape you, They're all more precious because they're temporary. The Stoic doesn't dwell on death to despair, but to dissolve the trivial. That promotion you're obsessing over, the insult that kept you up last night, at the end they'll weigh less than a breath. Seneca drilled deeper. It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. He catalogued how people squander years pleasing others, hoarding possessions they won't enjoy, or waiting for the right moment to begin living. Sound familiar? Modern distractions just dress this up with new labels: doom scrolling, binge watching, hustling for empty metrics. Memento Mori snaps that trance. When a TikTok trend fades in weeks but your life's work could ripple through generations, where will you invest? Start small. Place a reminder where you'll see it daily. A skull pendant, as the Stoics did, a tombstone photo on your phone's lock screen, or even a recurring calendar alert. You will die. Live accordingly, not to frighten but to focus. Legacy isn't about being remembered, it's about being awake while you're here. The chasing stops when you realize this moment, exactly as it is already the gift you've been running toward. How many decisions do you make in a day without actually thinking? The eighth Stoic move, journaling, is like hitting pause on autopilot to ask, was that action wise, or was it just another reflex chase? The Stoics didn't see writing as mere record-keeping. It was their daily debrief, a way to untangle impulses from intentions. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, scribbled his meditations not for fame, but as a mirror to check his own progress. Here's the irony: those private pages outlasted his empire because they reveal a universal truth: growth happens in the margins when we stop long enough to reflect. Think of your mind as a crowded marketplace. Desires shout, fears whisper, and external pressures haggle for your attention. Without a system to sort the noise, you'll chase whatever's loudest in the moment. Stoic journaling cuts through that chaos. Seneca ended each day with 3 questions. What did I do poorly today? What did I do well? What could I improve tomorrow? Not to wallow in regret, but to spot patterns. Maybe you snapped at a coworker because you were hungry, a clue that your anger was really mismanaged hunger. Or perhaps you skipped the gym to scroll through feeds, mistaking distraction for rest. The page doesn't lie. Marcus's meditations offer a masterclass in this. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But how his journals show him wrestling with his own hypocrisy, advising patience while fuming over delays, preaching humility yet basking in praise. That's the power of the practice. It turns ideals into accountable steps. When you record chasing external validation, I posted for likes, or caving to comfort, I hit snooze again, you're not failing. You're gathering data to course correct. Try these prompts tonight. What did I chase today that didn't serve me? Was my effort aligned with what I truly value? The first reveals your traps. Maybe you checked emails compulsively, mistaking busyness for progress. The second measures integrity. Did you gossip to fit in? Complain to bond. Small choices compound. Journaling shines a light on the gap between who you are and who you wish to be, not to shame, but to bridge. Here's the twist. Unlike modern gratitude journals that often skim the surface, Stoic writing digs into discomfort. It's easy to list, "I'm thankful for my job." Harder to admit, "I stayed in this job for prestige, not purpose." That's where liberation begins. When you spot the misalignment between your actions and your stated values, you stop chasing shadows and start walking toward substance. The ink on the page becomes a compass, not pointing north but pointing true. We live in a world that celebrates trophies, rankings, and final scores, where success gets reduced to a single moment captured in headlines or highlight reels. But the Stoics whispered a counterintuitive truth 2,000 years ago: fixating on outcomes is like trying to hold smoke. The ninth Stoic move flips the script entirely. Focus on what you can control, the process itself, and let the results take care of themselves. Epictetus, the philosopher who compared life to a banquet where we should take our portion with gratitude, offered a brilliant analogy. An archer's job isn't to hit the target, it's to aim well. The shot may go astray because the wind intervenes, but if his intention was sound, he's done his part. That shift from obsessing over bullseyes to perfecting your stance, grip, and release changes everything. Modern culture thrives on outcome addiction. Think of the college student grinding for straight A's but never falling in love with learning. The entrepreneur who measures self-worth by funding rounds instead of the craftsmanship of their product. Even relationships suffer when we chase the fantasy of happily ever after rather than showing up fully in each conversation, each small act of kindness. The Stoic asks, why outsource your contentment to variables you can't command? The archer can't control the gust that veers their arrow off course, but they can refine their technique with every shot. That's where real power lies. Consider Olympic athletes. Those who fixate on medals often choke under pressure, but the ones who lose themselves in the rhythm of their training, the icy pre-dawn swims, the weight room reps, the film study, perform best when it counts. Not because they don't care about winning, but because their attention is anchored in the controllable effort, preparation, mindset. The Stoic version of this is the sailor who focuses on trimming the sails while accepting the sea's unpredictability. They might prefer calm waters, but their skill lies in adapting to whatever comes. Here's how this applies off the mat or the court. In your career, you can't force a promotion, but you can master your craft showing up early, solving problems before they're asked, mentoring others without expectation. In relationships, you can't guarantee reciprocation, but you can choose to listen deeply, speak honestly, and love without tallying debts. Even parenting transforms when you release the need to raise a successful child and instead pour into the daily rituals of presence, the bedtime stories, the messy art projects, the patience through tantrums. The magic lies in detachment, not from caring, but from clinging. Seneca wrote, "The traveler who has lost their way often makes better time." When you stop straining toward distant mile markers, you notice the wildflowers along the path. The writer, no longer paralyzed by rejection slips, focuses on the purity of each sentence. The gardener who stops counting buds begins to love the soil itself. This week, pick one area where you've been fixated on an outcome, a number on the scale, a bank balance, a milestone. Now strip it back to process. What's one small, repeatable action within your control? Maybe it's writing 200 words daily without checking analytics, or cooking nourishing meals without obsessing over the mirror. The target will always drift, but your aim grows truer with each intentional breath. And sometimes, when you least expect it, the wind itself carries your arrow home. Have you ever felt the weight of a problem pressing down on you until you stepped outside, looked up at the night sky, and suddenly everything seemed smaller? That's the essence of the 10th Stoic move, the view from above. It's not about dismissing your struggles, but about seeing them in their true proportion against the backdrop of infinity. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet slept on the ground to stay grounded, wrote, "Think of the substance of the whole, how fleeting it is, how tiny your share of it." He wasn't being bleak, he was offering a lifeline. When you're caught in the cyclone of chasing, whether it's status, revenge, or perfection, this practice pulls you into orbit where the noise fades and clarity emerges. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, seething because you'll be late. Now, zoom out mentally, see your car from a drone's view, then higher, until the road becomes a thread in a sprawling city. Higher still, until continents shrink to patches on a blue marble floating in black space. That irritation, it's a blip in 13.8 billion years of cosmic history. The Stoics called this the cosmic perspective, and it's the ultimate antidote to self-importance. Your feud with a neighbor, your obsession with being right, that promotion you're fixated on, from Saturn's rings, they don't even register. But here's the paradox: this exercise doesn't belittle your life, it dignifies it. When you grasp how brief your time is in the universe's timeline, you stop wasting it on petty chases. The colleague who slighted you, in a century you'll both be dust and the grudge will have meant nothing. the hustle to impress strangers, their opinions vanish faster than footprints on a windy beach. Marcus revisited this daily. Remember how many doctors have died after furrowing their brows over countless deathbeds, how many astrologers after pompous forecasts, how many philosophers after endless debates. Mortality is the great equalizer, and that realization is strangely liberating. Try this meditation tonight. Stand outside or by a window. Imagine your body dissolving into the landscape, your town into the country, the earth into the cosmos. Watch your worries shrink from boulders to grains of sand. Then ask, what will this thing I'm chasing matter in a year, a decade, 1,000 years? Not to discourage action, but to refine it. The poet Mary Oliver captured the Stoic spirit when she wrote, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" The view from above isn't about nihilism, it's about urgency. When you see how small the stage is, you stop performing for the wrong audience and start living for the things that echo beyond your fleeting breath. History's most enduring figures understood this. Galileo, under house arrest for heresy, wrote about the stars to remind himself that his persecutor's power was a speck in the cosmos. Astronauts describe the overview effect, a profound shift in awareness after seeing Earth from space, where borders vanish and conflicts seem absurd. You don't need a spaceship for this, just the willingness to step back again and again, until the chasing stops feeling necessary and starts feeling like what it is, a choice. Every time you feel the pull of comparison or the heat of resentment, remember the stars. They've watched empires rise and fall, and they'll watch your worries fade too. The universe isn't indifferent, it's inviting you to play a bigger game. Envy is the thief of joy, not just a clever saying, but a psychological truth the Stoics understood long before social media turned comparison into a full-time job. Seneca, the sharp-tongued philosopher who tutored emperors, saw envy as a self-inflicted wound. Why drag in another's excellence to torment yourself? That's the 11th Stoic move, deleting comparisons. Not because others don't matter, but because measuring your life against theirs is like weighing yourself with someone else's scale. It gives you meaningless numbers and a bruised spirit. Consider how modern platforms weaponize this instinct. Scrolling through Instagram, you might see a friend's tropical vacation, a colleague's promotion post, or an influencer's curated kitchen, all within minutes. Each image whispers, "Why not you?" But here's what the algorithm won't show you: the arguments before that vacation smile, the sleepless nights behind the promotion, the credit card debt funding those marble countertops. Seneca saw this illusion 2 millennia ago. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. When you chase what others have, you're not coveting their reality. You're chasing a highlight reel with the suffering edited out. The Stoic solution isn't to demonize others' success, but to redefine your own metrics. Take the ancient story of Diogenes and Alexander. While the conqueror amassed empires, the philosopher lounged in his barrel, sunning himself. When Alexander asked what he could grant him, Diogenes replied, "Stop blocking my sunlight." The lesson: one man's treasure is another's obstruction. Your coworker might crave corner offices while you thrive writing in coffee shops. Your sibling might chase 6-figure salaries while you find richness in time with your kids. Comparison collapses when you ask, "Is this my path, or am I borrowing someone else's compass?" Social science confirms Seneca's hunch. Studies show that frequent social media users report higher envy and lower life satisfaction, not because their lives are worse, but because comparison rewires their perception. The Stoic antidote: practice sustain et abstain. Endure the discomfort of missing out, abstain from the dopamine hit of measuring up. When you feel the tug to compare, pause and audit. Does this person's achievement diminish mine? Does their journey invalidate mine? If you won a gold medal but spent the ceremony staring at the silver medalist's time, you'd miss your own victory lap. Seneca's letters reveal a radical exercise. List what you uniquely love: activities, values, quirks, then protect them like sacred ground. Maybe you adore rainy Sundays with novels, but society glorifies brunch crowds. Perhaps you prefer slow, deep work, but hustle culture rewards performative busyness. Walking your own path means letting others sprint past without glancing at their pace. The entrepreneur building a small, ethical business might lose to venture-backed rivals in revenue, but win in autonomy and peace. The artist rejecting trendy styles might fail by gallery standards but create work that outlives them. Here's the twist: deleting comparisons doesn't mean ignoring others. The Stoics studied role models not to mimic them, but to extract principles they could adapt. Marcus Aurelius admired his rival's work ethic but didn't copy his methods. Epictetus learned from Socrates but said, "I can't be Socrates, I can only be the best version of myself." Modern parallels abound. A writer might admire Toni Morrison's lyricism without berating themselves for not winning a Nobel Prize. A runner might draw inspiration from a friend's marathon time without self-loathing for their own pace. Try this detox for 1 week. Every time you catch yourself comparing your salary, your home, your relationships, ask 2 questions. First, does this serve my growth or just my insecurity? Second, what's one thing I'm grateful for in my own journey that they don't have? The first question weeds out toxic measuring contests. The second plants gratitude where envy once grew. Over time, you'll stop seeing life as a race and start seeing it as a mosaic, every piece different, none superior, all part of a bigger picture. As Seneca put it, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a life perfected without trials. Yours are yours alone, and that's where the polishing begins. Nothing lasts, not the grandest empire, not the deepest love, not even the mountains that seem to stand eternal. The 12th Stoic move cuts to the heart of our most exhausting chases, the desperate grasp for permanence. Epictetus, who trained his students with the precision of a surgeon, put it bluntly: keep death and exile before your eyes every day, along with everything that seems terrible. By doing so, you'll never have a base thought, nor will you desire anything beyond measure. At first, this sounds like a dark mantra, but peel back the layers and you'll find an unexpected liberation. When we stop demanding that people, positions, or possessions stay fixed, we stop exhausting ourselves trying to freeze a river with our bare hands. Consider how much suffering stems from resisting this truth. We cling to relationships, demanding they never change, only to resent the natural evolution of our partners or friends. We chase career peaks, believing tenure or titles will shield us from irrelevance, only to panic when industries shift overnight. Even our homes, those carefully curated spaces, require constant upkeep, as if we could stave off entropy itself. The Stoics didn't just acknowledge impermanence, they embraced it as the very fabric of reality. Marcus Aurelius meditated on this daily. Soon you'll be ashes or bones. A mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. Not to depress but to awaken. The sand slipping through the hourglass isn't a threat, it's the mechanism that makes time precious. This idea isn't unique to Stoicism. Buddhism's doctrine of anicca, impermanence, mirrors it strikingly. A monk watches a flower wilt not with grief but with reverence for its fleeting beauty. The Stoic version, amor fati, loving fate, including the inevitable unraveling. When a Roman general celebrated a triumph, a slave whispered in his ear, respice post te. Hominum te memento, look behind you, remember you're mortal, the Stoics would add. And remember, everything you love is too. This isn't nihilism, it's clarity. Modern psychology confirms the toll of denying impermanence. Attachment theory shows how fear of loss can suffocate relationships, clinging to a partner like a life raft rather than sailing beside them. Corporate cultures that idolize forever growth often implode under their own unrealistic expectations. Even wellness trends peddle the illusion of perpetual youth, fueling industries built on the denial of decay. The Stoic alternative, practice premeditatio malorum, visualizing the loss of what you cherish, not to dwell in dread but to savor its presence now. kiss your partner like it's the last time. Work with the focus of someone who knows their career won't define them forever. Collect memories, not trophies. Here's the paradox: accepting impermanence doesn't breed apathy, it fuels engagement. The chef who knows the meal will end plates each dish with care. The musician, aware their voice will fade, sings each note with presence. Even grief, when allowed to flow like a passing storm, leaves the heart more tender, not brittle. The Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, captures this perfectly. The cracks aren't hidden, they're illuminated, because what breaks can still hold beauty. Try this reframe today. Next time you feel the urge to clutch at a fading moment, a changing relationship, a shifting identity, pause. Whisper to yourself, this too shall pass. Not as resignation, but as permission to release the weight of forever. The sunset isn't less stunning because it's brief. The cherry blossom's glory lies in its willingness to fall. And your life, it's not diminished by its finiteness, it's intensified. Stoicism doesn't ask you to stop loving what's transient. It asks you to love it all the more fiercely, precisely because it won't last. The ego is a master illusionist. It convinces us that winning arguments, collecting accolades, and climbing social ladders are necessities rather than distractions. This 13th Stoic move pulls back the curtain on that deception. Silence the ego and you'll stop chasing mirages. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who could have demanded worship, instead wrote self-reminders like this: "You're just a soul carrying around a corpse." Brutal, maybe, but that visceral image cuts through the ego's grandiosity, revealing how absurd it is to posture and preen when we're all temporary. The Stoics didn't preach humility to diminish themselves, they practiced it to free themselves from the exhausting game of proving their worth. Modern culture feeds the ego like a starved beast. LinkedIn profiles scream, "Top 1% in my field." Instagram stories curate highlight reels masquerading as authenticity. Even casual conversations become subtle competitions. Who's busier, who's more stressed, who's secretly thriving. The ego thrives on these comparisons, convincing us that being right in an argument matters more than understanding, or that a job title defines our humanity. Seneca saw this clearly. The greatest obstacle to living is expectation, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. When we chase status, we're not living, we're performing. The Stoic antidote: replace self-promotion with service. Marcus's journals are littered with reminders to be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm, and the waters fall still around it. Notice the imagery: strength without spectacle. He didn't rule Rome by plastering his face on billboards. He showed up in plague-stricken slums, gave away inheritances, and judged his days by how many people he helped, not how many bowed. That's the litmus test. Are you acting for the inner scorecard: integrity, contribution, or the outer one: likes, titles, wins? Consider how differently history treats its humble giants versus its peacocks. Steve Jobs, for all his brilliance, often burned bridges to prove his genius. Meanwhile, figures like Fred Rogers, who never chased fame but simply served children with radical kindness, left legacies that outlast trends. The Stoic doesn't ask, "How will this make me look?" but "How will this improve lives?" That shift transforms chasing into channeling, redirecting energy from self-aggrandizement to meaningful action. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Next time you feel the ego's itch to correct someone publicly, to name drop, to stew over perceived slights, pause. Ask, does this serve anyone or just my need to feel important? The writer who obsesses over viral threads might produce clickbait. The one who writes to illuminate creates enduring work. The parent demanding respect from toddlers might fuel power struggles. The one modeling patience earns genuine connection. The irony: the less you chase validation, the more it finds you, not as a trophy but as a byproduct. Astronaut Chris Hadfield trained for space by focusing on meticulous preparation, not heroics. His viral Space Oddity video wasn't a calculated play for fame. It was a genuine moment of joy shared from orbit. The Stoics would nod. Excellence attracts attention, but chasing it corrupts the craft. Try this today. Perform one act of invisible service, help a colleague anonymously, leave a generous tip without signing, mentor someone expecting nothing. Feel the quiet satisfaction that comes when the ego isn't clipboard in hand taking credit. That's Stoic humility, not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And in that space, you'll find a different kind of power, one that doesn't need to chase because it's already enough. Imagine an invisible council of the wisest minds in history, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, silently observing your every choice. Would you still refresh your feed for the 20th time today? Would you still gossip about a coworker or indulge that petty grudge? This 14th Stoic move, acting as if you're being watched, isn't about surveillance, it's about awakening your inner witness. Seneca captured this in a letter to his friend Lucilius. Let us set before our eyes some good man, and keep him ever at our side, so that we may live as though he were watching us, and do everything as though he saw what we were doing. The genius of this practice lies in its simplicity. When you conjure the presence of someone you admire, your actions rise to meet their gaze. Think of how behavior shifts under observation. Athletes push harder when coaches watch. Writers choose words carefully knowing editors will read them. Even children tidy rooms when parents are near. The Stoics recognized this human tendency and flipped it inward. Instead of chasing external validation, they cultivated an internalized mentor, a mental arbiter of integrity. Marcus Aurelius meditated on this daily, asking himself how his Stoic role models would react to setbacks or temptations. The question wasn't what will people think, but would my hero respect this choice? Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on the Hawthorne effect show people modify behavior when they know they're being studied. But the Stoic version is more profound. It's not about performing for others, but aligning with your highest self. Consider the entrepreneur tempted to cut corners for quick profit. With Seneca's imagined gaze upon them, they might recall his warning. A hungry people listens not to reason, nor cares for justice, nor is bent by any prayers. Shortcuts starve the soul. Here's where it transforms chasing into choosing. The dopamine rush of a social media spat fades when you picture Epictetus shaking his head at your wasted energy. The urge to splurge on status symbols weakens under Marcus Aurelius's reminder. You've wandered all over and finally realized you never found what you were after: happiness, tranquility, because you sought it not within but in palaces and fortunes. The observer isn't there to judge but to mirror the standards you already know are true. Try this today. Pick a historical or personal hero whose character resonates with you. Before decisions, big or small, pause and hear their silent counsel. Would your grandmother's steady hands approve of how you handled that frustration? Would Mandela's grace in prison temper your reaction to a rude email? The practice isn't about perfection, it's about pause. Between impulse and action, that split second of imagined scrutiny becomes the brake on reckless chasing and the accelerator toward purposeful living. Seneca took it further. He advised writing letters to mentors, real or imagined, confessing missteps, not for absolution but for clarity. The act of articulating a lapse to someone you respect exposes rationalizations. Try typing an email you'll never send. Dear Marcus, today I yelled at a waiter because my latte was cold. The absurdity of admitting pettiness to a philosopher emperor dissolves defensiveness. Suddenly, the chase for being right in that moment reveals its true size, a speck in your moral landscape. The ultimate shift happens when the external observer internalizes. You start moving through the world not as someone performing under watch, but as someone who's integrated those values, like a chef who no longer needs health inspectors to maintain standards because excellence is now habit. That's when chasing stops, not because you're being monitored, but because you've become the person who doesn't need to chase at all. anger, envy, panic. These emotions hit like lightning, sparking reactions we often regret. But what if there were a way to intercept that split second before impulse becomes action? That's the 15th Stoic move, the art of delayed reaction. Epictetus, who compared the mind to a boiling pot, offered this advice: don't pour water into the pot while it's still seething, wait for the bubbles to settle. It's not about suppressing emotion, but creating space between trigger and response so you stop chasing every spark with gasoline. Modern neuroscience confirms the Stoics were onto something. When insults fly or plans collapse, the amygdala, our brain's alarm system, floods the body with cortisol, narrowing vision to fight or flight. This biological hijack lasts roughly 90 seconds unless we feed it with mental kerosene. The Stoic pause is like installing a circuit breaker in that wiring. Marcus Aurelius described it as holding your ruling center undisturbed, not by denying anger's heat, but refusing to let it dictate your hands. Think of heated moments you've witnessed or contributed to. The manager who fires off a scathing email after a missed deadline only to apologize hours later. The parent who snaps at a child's spilled milk, their frustration disproportionate to the mess. Reactive chasing turns small sparks into wildfires, but consider the alternative. When basketball coach Phil Jackson's players argued with referees, he'd make them visualize floating in a cool ocean before speaking. That mental reset wasn't passivity, it was strategic emotional aikido, redirecting energy toward solutions rather than tantrums. Here's how to train this muscle. First, identify your flashpoints, certain phrases, tones, or situations that reliably trip your wires. Maybe it's being interrupted or seeing someone take credit for your work. Then, install physical triggers. Epictetus practiced taking a deep breath before responding to provocation. The ancient counting to 10 method works because it stretches the pause just long enough for cortisol to recede. Modern variations include excusing yourself to splash cold water on your face, or typing responses in drafts you'll revisit after lunch. The magic lies in what fills that pause. Seneca advised interrogating the emotion. Why am I reacting this way? Is this truly harmful or just unexpected? A traffic jam might feel like a personal affront until you ask, is this driver trying to ruin my day, or are they just as stuck as I am? That moment of reflection dissolves the illusion of persecution that fuels so much reactive chasing. History's most composed leaders mastered this. When Mahatma Gandhi was struck by a heckler during a speech, he didn't retaliate or flee. He paused, then continued as if nothing happened. His restraint wasn't weakness, it was weaponized patience. The Stoic version: see every provocation as a test of your principles. Every time you withhold a knee-jerk reaction, you're not losing the fight, you're winning the longer game of who controls your mind. Try this today. Pick one routine frustration, a slow-moving line, a critical comment, and practice the 10-second rule. Before reacting, count silently while breathing deeply. Notice how the urgency fades, revealing choices you couldn't see mid-tempest. Like a shaken snow globe settling, clarity emerges when we stop chasing the flurry. Over time, that pause becomes not a cage for your emotions, but the space where your best self steps forward. Exile, poverty, illness. Most of us spend our lives running from these fates, yet the Stoics discovered something astonishing. Within those very constraints lies a peculiar kind of freedom. Take Musonius Rufus, the philosopher who was banished to a barren island by Emperor Nero. While others might have crumbled, he turned his exile into a masterclass on liberation. With no palace to maintain, no sycophants to entertain, he wrote, "Exile deprives a man of his usual distractions, leaving him face to face with his real needs." Stripped of status and comforts, he found clarity in the silence, teaching students who sought wisdom, not connections. His poverty became a sieve, filtering out false friends and hollow ambitions. His isolation, a greenhouse for self-knowledge. This seems counterintuitive in a world that equates freedom with endless options, but think of how constraints sharpen creativity. A poet working within a sonnet's strict meter often produces richer verse than one drowning in blank page possibilities. Jazz musicians thrive on chord progressions, not chaos. Even Silicon Valley innovators preach the power of scarcity mindset, forcing breakthroughs by limiting resources. The Stoics were early pioneers of this truth. Boundaries don't confine, they focus. Modern minimalism echoes this wisdom. Every Marie Kondo devotee tossing unused gadgets or unworn clothes is in effect recreating Musonius' exile voluntarily. They're choosing constraints, one-in, one-out wardrobes, tiny homes, not as deprivation, but as rebellion against the consumerist chase. The average person makes 35,000 decisions daily, many about trivialities like which shampoo bottle to pick from a wall of nearly identical options. Minimalism slices through that noise like Musonius' banishment cut through Roman politicking. When you own 10 books, you read them deeply. When your calendar has white space, presence becomes possible. There's neuroscience behind this. Decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion from constant choices, drains willpower, making us prone to impulsive chases, that midnight Amazon scroll, the sale item you never needed. Constraints act as guardrails, like Odysseus tying himself to the mast to resist the sirens. Setting limits, a spending freeze, a digital detox, frees you from reacting to every temptation. The Stoic twist: embrace constraints before they're forced upon you. Practice living on less before a recession demands it. Cultivate solitude before loneliness strikes. History's most profound voices often emerged from limitation. Nelson Mandela's prison cell became his crucible of resilience. Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony deaf. Viktor Frankl found meaning in Auschwitz by realizing everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude. Notice the pattern. Constraints didn't stifle them, they distilled purpose. Here's the challenge: pick one area where excess drains you. Closets full of unworn clothes, a calendar hemorrhaging time, a mind cluttered with notifications. Now impose a deliberate constraint. Try a week without online shopping, or design a focus zone in your home with just a chair, notebook, and single task. At first, it'll feel like loss. Then, like Musonius on his island, you'll notice something unexpected: the spaciousness where chasing used to be, the things you thought were limits. They were the walls of your cage until you realized they could be the pillars of your freedom. Imagine two people struck by the same misfortune. One collapses into, "Why does this always happen to me?" while the other asks, "What can I do with this?" That split-second shift in perspective is the essence of the 17th Stoic move, rejecting victimhood. No philosophy understands this deeper than Stoicism, forged in the furnace of real suffering. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled by his master's brutality, still declared, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that shackles or frees you." His body was enslaved, but his mind remained unconquered. Proof that adversity only chains us when we hand it the keys. Modern culture often rewards victimhood with attention, sympathy, even identity. Social media algorithms amplify outrage, therapists pathologize normal struggles, and entire industries profit from the narrative that life owes us ease. The Stoics would call this a dangerous delusion. Seneca, exiled and later forced to suicide by Nero, wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Notice the framing: not "trials happen to me," but "trials polish through me." Victimhood keeps us chasing external saviors. Stoicism trains us to become our own liberators. This isn't about denying pain or injustice. It's about reclaiming agency where it still exists. Picture two employees facing layoffs. One spirals into blaming the economy, the boss, fate. Their energy drains into complaint. The other audits their skills, networks aggressively, sees the disruption as a push toward reinvention. Both feel the sting, but only one remains paralyzed by it. Epictetus' metaphor cuts to the core. Circumstances are like rocks. You can trip over them or build with them. The rock doesn't choose, you do. History's most resilient figures embody this. Nelson Mandela studied his jailer's language to negotiate future peace. Malala Yousafzai turned an assassin's bullet into a global education crusade. Neither pretended their suffering wasn't real, they simply refused to let it define them. The Stoic twist, victimhood isn't just unhelpful, it's a distraction from the real work. While the victim chases sympathy or revenge, the Stoic chases solutions and meaning. Try this reframe today. Next time you catch yourself ruminating on unfairness, pause and ask Epictetus' question: what part of this is truly beyond my influence? The traffic jam, unchangeable, your grip on the steering wheel, yours to adjust, the job rejection, done, your decision to upskill or pivot, fully in your hands. Every moment spent lamenting what you can't control steals energy from what you can. That's the Stoic secret, not immunity to hardship, but the quiet recognition that you're always more free than you feel. Every culture has its idols, musicians, athletes, billionaires. People we're conditioned to chase after, to measure ourselves against. But what if the heroes we've been taught to admire are leading us down the wrong path? The Stoics offer a radical alternative, intentionally selecting role models whose lives embody the virtues you aspire to, not the hollow trophies society worships. Marcus Aurelius filled his private journals with tributes to his mentors, not just philosophers but everyday figures like his adoptive father Antoninus Pius, who showed him how to rule with patience and humility. He didn't chase fame or riches, he chased character, and that's the 18th Stoic move, building your own personal pantheon of exemplars who point you toward what truly matters. Think of it like upgrading your inner board of directors. Most people have mental advisors. They've absorbed unconsciously celebrities flaunting luxury, influencers peddling perfection, even competitive co-workers measuring success in corner offices. These shadow mentors pull your strings without you realizing it, fueling chases you never consciously chose. The Stoic antidote: deliberately curate your influences. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was shipwrecked and lost everything before stumbling into a bookstore and discovering Socrates' teachings. That encounter didn't just change his life, it birthed a philosophy that's endured for millennia. Who's your shipwreck moment waiting to introduce you to? History's most resilient figures leaned on this practice. Frederick Douglass kept a bust of Cicero in his study, drawing courage from the orator's defiance of tyranny. James Stockdale, the naval pilot imprisoned and tortured in Vietnam, survived by channeling Epictetus' lessons on endurance. Even modern innovators like Tim Ferriss credit Seneca's letters with helping them navigate success without losing themselves. The common thread: they didn't leave their role models to chance. They handpicked guides who'd steer them through storms. Here's where it gets practical. Start by identifying 3 figures, historical or contemporary, who exemplify traits you lack. Maybe it's Cotto the Younger's unshakable integrity, refusing to compromise even when it cost him politically. Or perhaps it's the compassion of someone like Fred Rogers, who treated every interaction as sacred. Don't just admire them, study their failures as closely as their triumphs. Marcus revered his predecessor Hadrian, but also noted his temper, a warning of what to temper in himself. Create a Stoic Hall of Fame. Write their names where you'll see them daily. Jot down their pivotal quotes. Even imagine how they'd handle your dilemmas. The magic happens when these mentors become mental reflexes. Facing a moral crossroads, ask, what would Cotto do? Paralyzed by fear, channel Epictetus, who turned enslavement into enlightenment. The philosopher Emperor Marcus didn't just read about his heroes, he let them live through his choices. That's the ultimate shift, when chasing external validation is replaced by internal dialogue with voices wiser than your own. Your idols shape your ideals, and your ideals shape your life. So choose mentors who don't just dazzle you with achievements, but deepen you with their character. The ones whose legacy isn't just what they did, but who they were. There's a relentless tug of war happening in your mind right now between the phantom of the future and the reality of this moment. The 19th Stoic move pulls you back from that chase with a single command: be here now. Marcus Aurelius, who shouldered the weight of an empire, still scribbled reminders like this in his private journal: confine yourself to the present. Not as a platitude, but as a tactical defense against the tyranny of what-ifs and if-onlys. The Stoics didn't practice present moment awareness to escape reality. They wielded it like a scalpel to dissect the illusions that keep us running in circles. Modern life is engineered to hijack your attention from the present. Notifications yank you toward future obligations. Regrets drag you backward. Meanwhile, the only moment you can actually shape, this breath, this choice, this step, slips through your fingers like sand. Neuroscientists call this default mode network activity, a mental autopilot where the brain churns through hypothetical scenarios like a hamster wheel. The Stoic antidote: procession, the discipline of attention. Epictetus taught his students to stay within the present as a walker stays within their lane. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because anxiety about tomorrow poisons today's potential. Consider how often chasing derails you. You might delay joy until some milestone, a promotion, a relationship status, a number on the scale, only to find that when you arrive, the goalposts have moved. Or you sacrifice presence with loved ones, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's meeting during bedtime stories. The irony: the future you're fixated on will eventually become another present moment you'll miss because you're too busy chasing the next one. Seneca saw this clearly. The greatest obstacle to living is expectation, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. The Stoic approach shares DNA with mindfulness, but with a crucial twist. While meditation often focuses on observing thoughts non-judgmentally, Stoic presence is active. It interrogates whether those thoughts serve you. When Marcus wrote, "Throw away your books and stop letting yourself be distracted," he wasn't advocating ignorance. He was attacking the intellectual dithering that keeps us analyzing life instead of living it. Picture a musician so anxious about nailing the high note in bar 40 that they flub the passage in front of them. Mastery and peace come from attending to the measure being played. Practical applications abound. The entrepreneur obsessing over exit strategies might neglect the product in their hands. The parent stressing about college admissions misses the childhood unfolding daily. Even personal growth gets sabotaged when you're so fixated on becoming your best self that you disdain the imperfect but vital person you are now. The Stoic remedy is sensory grounding. When anxiety about tomorrow grips you, press your feet into the floor. Trace the rim of your coffee cup with your thumb. Listen to the cadence of your own breath. These aren't new age hacks, they're ancient recalibrations, shifting you from chasing ghosts to engaging with what's real. History's most focused minds harnessed this. Michelangelo didn't sculpt the David by fantasizing about gallery openings. He chiseled one deliberate strike at a time. Serena Williams dominates matches by playing one point at a time, a mantra coaches drill to counter future tripping. The Stoic version: treat presence as your superpower. When you wash dishes, wash dishes. When you listen, listen completely. The chasing mind screams that multitasking is efficiency, but depth in work, in love, in craft only flowers in undivided attention. Try this experiment. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Sit still and catalog every sensation: the weight of your clothes, the play of light, the faint taste in your mouth. When thoughts about later intrude, they will. Greet them like uninvited salesmen and return to the now. At first, it'll feel like holding water, but gradually, you'll notice a muscle memory developing, the ability to drop anchor when the currents of what's next try to sweep you away. That's the Stoic art of presence, not passive acceptance, but fierce ownership of the only moment you ever truly possess this one. Every choice, no matter how small, chips away at your mental reserves. What color to paint the kitchen walls, which phone plan to pick, whether to skip the gym for one more episode. By mid-afternoon, most of us are so drained from deciding that we default to autopilot, scrolling aimlessly or reaching for comfort foods. But what if the secret to preserving your willpower wasn't better decisions, but fewer of them? That's the 20th Stoic move, simplifying choices by pre-committing to your values, so you stop exhausting yourself chasing the illusion of perfect options. Seneca called this uniformity of life, a radical streamlining where fewer, more deliberate decisions leave room for what truly matters. Modern psychology confirms what Seneca intuited: decision fatigue is real. Studies show judges are more likely to deny parole late in the day, not because cases are worse, but because their mental energy is depleted. The Stoic solution: build guardrails so routine choices don't drain you. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who wore the same plain tunic daily to conserve focus for statecraft, or Steve Jobs' iconic black turtleneck, adopted not for style but to eliminate wardrobe debates. These weren't quirks, they were tactical reductions of trivial decisions, preserving bandwidth for the consequential. Here's how it works in practice. Instead of agonizing over whether to wake early, pre-commit. If it's a weekday, I rise at 6, no negotiation, no mental energy wasted bargaining with the snooze button. Instead of debating whether to check emails first thing, set a rule. Mornings are for deep work, inboxes wait until noon. The power lies in removing the choice altogether, like a train set on tracks, no derailment by whim. Seneca praised this as living according to a design, where values, not passing moods, steer your days. Consider the irony of modern abundance. Supermarket aisles burst with 50 kinds of olive oil. Dating apps offer endless swipes, and streaming platforms drown us in options. Yet research reveals that more choices don't bring satisfaction. They breed regret. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Their philosophy wasn't about deprivation, but distillation, boiling life down to the few things worthy of your deliberation. As Seneca wrote to Lucilius, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. Chasing perfect decisions is like trying to drink from a fire hose. You end up parched amid the deluge. The magic of pre-commitment shines brightest in moral gray zones. Ever tell yourself you'll just browse a sale, then max out your credit card, or vow to leave a party early only to stay until dawn? Seneca's uniformity principle cuts through this self-sabotage. Decide in advance. I don't lend money to friends, it corrupts both sides. Or I leave gatherings by 10 to honor my morning routine. These aren't rigid rules, they're moats protecting your priorities from the sieges of impulse. Try this audit for 1 week. Track every decision that sparks hesitation. What to eat, when to exercise, how to respond to a passive-aggressive text. Then identify 3 areas where you can install Seneca's uniformity. Maybe it's a weekly meal template, a fixed bedtime, or a non-negotiable response time for messages. Notice how much mental space opens when you stop reinventing the wheel with each turn. Like a tree that doesn't debate which way to grow its branches but simply reaches for the sun, your growth becomes effortless when aligned with preset values. The beauty of this system, it's not about control but clarity. The musician who practices scales daily isn't stifling creativity, they're building the foundation for improvisation. Similarly, automating trivial choices frees you to respond artfully when life throws its real curveballs. Seneca's letters reveal the payoff. When you've decided what matters, the rest becomes background noise. No more chasing the phantom of perfect decisions, just steady progress toward the life you've already chosen. The average person's attention is under siege, not by invading armies, but by pings, scrolls, and endless tabs vying for focus. The Stoics, though they never faced smartphones, diagnosed this struggle centuries ago. Epictetus warned, if you pour a cup of dirty water into a clear spring, you lose the spring. So too with your mind, when you pour in distractions, you lose its clarity. His metaphor captures the 21st Stoic move, guarding your attention like a fortress under attack. Today's digital onslaught isn't just annoying, it fractures the very capacity for deep thought the Stoics considered sacred. Consider the irony. Ancient Rome had its own version of distraction: public games, gossip in the baths, political theater. But Seneca saw through the noise. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. He'd recoil at modern multitasking, which neuroscientists confirm is a myth. What we call multitasking is just rapid attention shifting, leaving us exhausted and shallow. The Stoic solution: circle the wagons, as pioneers did against threats. Draw boundaries so trivial chases can't breach your mental sanctum. Marcus Aurelius modeled this by writing his meditations at dawn, when the world still slept, claiming the quiet before others could claim his focus. Practical defense starts with recognizing attention thieves. Social media platforms engineer infinite scroll to exploit dopamine loops. News outlets peddle outrage because fear hooks deeper than facts. Even productivity tools can morph into distraction: endless app hopping between email, Slack, and spreadsheets. The Stoic response isn't Luddite rejection, but intentional design. Try this for 1 week. Log every digital interaction that leaves you feeling drained versus nourished. You'll spot patterns. Perhaps Instagram drains you while podcast walks refuel. Now engineer your defaults. Delete tempting apps from your home screen. Schedule focus blocks where notifications are silenced. Use website blockers during creative hours. Like Seneca retreating to his country villa to write, create zones where distraction can't follow. Digital minimalism extends beyond screens. Just as Musonius Rufus wore coarse clothing to avoid luxury's grip, strip your environment of attention pollutants. A cluttered desk, a TV blaring in the background, even open-plan offices all scatter focus. The Stoics practiced ascesis, disciplined training of the senses. Modern equivalents might include a no-phone rule for meals, reading physical books to escape hyperlinks, or adopting a one-tab rule for browsers. Each habit rebuilds the muscle of sustained attention that distraction atrophies. Here's the deeper shift. Guarding attention isn't about austerity, it's about reverence. When you treat your focus as finite and sacred, you stop chasing every shiny demand. The writer who silences their phone produces richer work than the one tethered to tweets. The parent fully present at the playground builds memories no likes can rival. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak." Today, we might add 2 hands but 1 focus so we can create more than we consume. The more you defend your attention, the more you'll discover it was never trivial pursuit you craved, but depth itself, the stillness where meaning grows. Words are currency in the social marketplace. We trade them for approval, wield them for control, spill them to fill silences that make us uneasy. But what if this constant verbal striving is just another chase in disguise? The 22nd Stoic move strips back the layers of our compulsive speech, revealing a quieter path. Epictetus, whose teachings flowed from the humility of his enslaved origins, put it plainly: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. This wasn't just etiquette advice, it was armor against the exhausting game of social one-upmanship. Modern dialogue often resembles a tennis match of monologues, each player waiting not to understand but to reload their own talking points. Meetings devolve into vocal jostling for airtime. Dinner parties become performative storytelling contests. Even digital exchanges prioritize rapid-fire reactions over reflection. The Stoics saw this frenzy for what it was, a disguised hunger for dominance. When Seneca observed, "Speech is the mirror of the soul," he hinted at a deeper truth, that compulsive speaking often mirrors inner unrest, a need to prove worth through verbal conquest. Consider how silence unnerves us. A pause in conversation feels like vacuum we rush to fill with anecdotes, opinions, even platitudes. But the Stoic practice of measured speech turns silence into a sieve, filtering out the trivial to preserve only what's essential. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor, known for his laconic responses in Senate debates. While others chased rhetorical flourishes, he distilled thoughts to their essence, unnerving adversaries who expected volleys of verbosity. His restraint wasn't weakness, it was the confidence of someone who didn't need to verbally dominate to know his own value. The contrast with today's communication couldn't be starker. Podcast hosts interrupt guests to showcase their own insights. Twitter threads reward snappy comebacks over considered discourse. Workplace cultures glorify thinking out loud, mistaking volume for clarity. Beneath this lies an unspoken hierarchy. Those who speak most assert social dominance, while listeners risk being labeled passive. The Stoic disrupts this calculus by recognizing that true influence often flows to those who listen with intent. Think of the therapist who transforms lives without divulging personal views, or the leader whose rare but precise interjections carry weight because they're not diluted in chatter. Practically, this begins with recalibrating habits. Before speaking, the Stoic asks, is this necessary? Is it kind? Does it improve upon silence? Epictetus trained his students to pause before responding, not to craft clever retorts, but to assess whether any response was warranted at all. Modern applications abound. In negotiations, mirroring a counterpart's points before rebutting often yields deeper concessions than aggressive persuasion. In conflicts, paraphrasing someone's grievance before defending oneself disarms hostility. Even in storytelling, the most gripping narrators know that what's omitted often resonates louder than what's spelled out. There's neuroscience behind this. The speaker-listener neural coupling phenomenon shows that brains synchronize when one person truly listens, creating trust and understanding no monologue can match. The Stoic would nod knowingly. Connection thrives in the spaces between words. When we stop chasing the mic, we start hearing the music beneath the noise. Try this experiment for one day. Tally how often you speak to impress versus to connect. Notice the urge to correct minor inaccuracies in stories, to overshadow someone's vacation tale with your grander adventure, to reframe a colleague's idea as your own. Each of these is a micro-chase for social capital. Then shift modes, ask open-ended questions and let answers linger without scaffolding. Practice the 5-second rule, allowing silence to breathe after someone finishes speaking, often drawing out their most honest thoughts. Like a hunter sitting still in the forest, you'll discover truths that flee from relentless noise. The paradox: speaking less doesn't shrink your presence, it amplifies it. Think of historical figures renowned for brevity: Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, Tesla's cryptic public remarks, Queen Elizabeth Roman II Stoic dignity. Their power sprang not from filling airtime, but from the weight of chosen words. Epictetus' 2 ears weren't a handicap, they were an evolutionary advantage. In a world chasing volume, the deepest voice is often the one that knows when to whisper. Zeno stood on the deck of his merchant ship, watching the waves swallow his fortune barrels of precious purple dye sinking into the depths, taking with them his livelihood, his status, everything he'd built. In that moment, what seemed like catastrophe became the pivot of his life. Washed ashore in Athens with nothing, he wandered into a bookstore where the owner was reading about Socrates. The philosopher's words struck him like lightning. What you cannot control is not your concern. That shipwreck didn't just strip Zeno of material wealth, it shattered his illusion that relentless chasing could ward off chaos. Instead of scrambling to rebuild his former life, he sat at the feet of philosophers, eventually founding Stoicism itself. His greatest loss became humanity's gain. We've all experienced versions of this, moments when life refuses to follow our carefully laid plans. The job offer that evaporates after months of networking. The relationship that crumbles despite our exhaustive efforts to fix it. Society tells us to try harder, but the Stoics whisper a radical alternative: stop. Not from laziness, but from the recognition that some doors only open when you stop ramming your shoulders against them. Seneca captured this in a letter: fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. The entrepreneur obsessing over a failing venture might miss the adjacent opportunity visible only when they stop straining. The parent micromanaging a child's path might stifle the very independence that child needs to thrive. Consider modern parallels. A writer forcing words onto the page often produces stiff, unnatural prose, while the one who steps away to live life finds stories flowing unbidden. Scientists call this the incubation period, when breakthroughs happen not during frantic effort, but in showers or walks when the mind relaxes its grip. The Stoic practices apatheia, not apathy, but a release from the emotional turbulence of clinging to specific outcomes. Like a gardener who plants seeds but doesn't dig them up daily to check growth, we can act with diligence while surrendering the timeline and form of results. History's most pivotal turns often came from surrendered plans. Einstein conceived relativity while working as a patent clerk, far from the academic prestige he'd chased earlier. J.K. Rowling's discarded manuscript found a home only after she stopped tailoring it to publishers' whims. Even in nature, the bamboo plant spends years growing roots underground before shooting up 90 feet in weeks. No amount of surface chasing would hasten its invisible preparation. Here's the practice: next time you're fixated on an outcome, a promotion, a reconciliation, a creative milestone, pause and ask, am I attached to the result or the purpose? The former ties your peace to the unpredictable. The latter anchors you in values no circumstance can erode. The Stoic doesn't abandon goals but holds them loosely, like a trapeze artist who must release one bar to grasp the next. Zeno's shipwreck wasn't the end, it was the current that carried him to his true harbor. Your greatest redirect might be hidden in what feels like surrender. Gratitude in our modern world often gets reduced to a quick mental checklist: family, health, maybe a roof overhead before diving back into the relentless chase for more. But Stoic gratitude isn't a passive acknowledgement. It's a radical rebellion against the myth that fulfillment lies just beyond the next purchase, promotion, or milestone. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, began each day not by reviewing his empire's riches, but by consciously enumerating the simplest gifts: the warmth of sunlight, the strength in his limbs, the wisdom of teachers long gone. This 24th Stoic move, practicing gratitude for enough, isn't about settling. It's about recognizing that the chase itself is the distraction, and contentment isn't a finish line but a lens through which to see what you already hold. Consider how society wires us to view gratitude as a temporary pit stop on the highway of ambition. Ads whisper, you'll finally be happy after the upgrade. Social media feeds curate lives that seem perpetually ahead of ours. Even well-meaning self-help gurus preach gratitude as a tool to attract more, twisting it into another form of chasing. The Stoics cut through this noise with surgical precision. Seneca wrote, "Until we have begun to go without, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are." His words expose the illusion. The more we acquire, the more we numb ourselves to the joy of what's already here. Marcus' morning ritual, documented in Meditations, reads like an antidote to modern discontent. He thanked the rooster for crowing him awake, the bread for nourishing his body, even the annoying colleague for teaching him patience. This wasn't poetic flourish, it was tactical training. By anchoring his attention to mundane blessings, he immunized himself against the fever of endless wanting. Modern science validates this. Studies on gratitude journaling show it lowers cortisol, boosts serotonin, and even reduces materialism. But the Stoic twist: they didn't practice gratitude to feel better, they did it to see clearly. When you recognize the chair supporting you as a marvel of craftsmanship, the water from your tap as a luxury ancient kings lacked. The chase for better starts to look like a hamster wheel disguised as a ladder. Try this tonight. Instead of listing 3 things you're grateful for, dig deeper. Why these things? What do they reveal about your values? If you're grateful for your job, is it the paycheck or the purpose it provides? For your friends, is it their loyalty or how they mirror your best self? Epictetus warned, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things he has not, but rejoices for those he has." The difference is subtle but seismic. Joy isn't the absence of desire, but the presence of recognition. The irony, gratitude for enough doesn't diminish ambition, it refines it. The entrepreneur who appreciates their current clients serves them better, attracting more organically. The artist who loves their modest studio creates more boldly than one fixated on a dream loft. Even relationships deepen when partners stop chasing fantasy, perfections, and start honoring the real, flawed humans before them. Marcus knew this. His gratitude practice didn't make him a passive emperor, but a resilient one, able to lead wars and plagues without losing sight of the sky's stillness above the chaos. So tonight, as you jot down your grateful moments, add a Stoic question. What would I miss if it were gone? Not to invoke fear, but to sharpen appreciation. That scratchy wool blanket, its warmth when power fails. Your neighbor's noisy dog, a reminder that life pulses beyond your walls. The Stoics didn't wait for loss to awaken gratitude. They simulated it through imagination, turning ordinary days into feasts and quiet moments into temples. In a world screaming that more is always better, they whispered the counterintuitive truth: enough is already here, if you have the eyes to see it. Philosophy isn't meant to stay on the page, it's meant to be forged in the fires of real life. That's the essence of the 25th and final Stoic move: stress testing your principles when stakes are high and temptations strong. Seneca put it bluntly: wisdom is proven knowledge, not just good intentions. You might tell yourself you don't care about social status, but does that hold when you're overlooked at a party? You may preach detachment from wealth until a rival flaunts their new sports car and your stomach tightens. The Stoics didn't just admire virtues from afar, they built mental armor to withstand life's sieges brick by brick. Consider Marcus Aurelius leading Rome through plague and war while scribbling reminders like, "The cucumber is bitter. Then throw it away. There are brambles in your path, then go around." This wasn't poetic musing, it was battlefield triage for the mind. Every irritation, every provocation became a chance to ask, does my philosophy bend or break here? Modern parallels are everywhere. The entrepreneur who values integrity but faces pressure to fudge numbers. The parent committed to patience until a toddler's meltdown at the grocery store frays their last nerve. These aren't failures, they're the anvils where beliefs get hammered into true conviction. The Stoic audit works like a scientist's experiment. When emotion surges, envy at a friend's success, panic before a speech, rage in traffic, pause and dissect the reaction. What underlying belief just got triggered? If you're seething because someone took credit for your idea, dig deeper. Why does recognition matter to me? Is my worth really tied to others' opinions? Epictetus trained his students to greet insults as gifts, not to masochistically enjoy them, but because they revealed where their principles were still theoretical. If someone tells you a certain person spoke ill of you, he advised, don't defend yourself but reply, "He must not know my other faults, or he wouldn't have mentioned only these." That's not just wit, it's pressure testing detachment in real time. Practical stress tests abound. Next time you're tempted to chase, whether it's scrolling for likes, overspending to impress, or people pleasing at your own expense, freeze the moment. Ask Seneca's question, is this belief sturdy enough to stand, or is it just a cardboard cutout of virtue? The athlete who trains only in fair weather isn't ready for storms. Similarly, values that crumble under boredom, loneliness, or social pressure were never truly yours. They were costumes you wore when life felt easy. History's most resilient figures lived this. Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and tortured for 7 years, survived by replaying Epictetus lessons in his cell. "You must learn to endure what you can't control," he'd whisper as guards tightened shackles. His Stoicism wasn't academic, it was the only tool that didn't shatter under interrogation. Contrast this with the fair-weather moralist who champions honesty until a white lie could save their reputation. Integrity isn't what you proclaim in the mirror, it's what you practice when the room gets dark. Here's the ultimate test: when your principles cost you something, comfort, approval, even money, do they still feel worth it? The writer who turns down a lucrative but soulless project, the friend who speaks hard truths knowing it might distance them, the employee who reports misconduct despite career risks. Seneca called this the proof when philosophy moves from your lips to your spine. No Stoic ever promised this would feel good in the moment, but they swore something better, that on the other side of these trials you'll find a version of yourself that no chase can unsettle, because every temptation, every provocation has already been met and mastered. So don't just collect these moves like coins in a jar. Spend them, fray them at the edges, let life scrape against them until only the unshakable remains. Because the real measure of Stoicism isn't what you can quote, it's what you can withstand. We've journeyed through 25 Stoic moves designed to pull you out of the exhausting chase, whether it's for approval, possessions, or some elusive version of perfection. Each one is a tool, not a theory. Think of them like a carpenter's belt. You don't need every implement at once, but knowing they're there means you're never stuck. From the dichotomy of control to the daily audit of your attention, these practices aren't about retreating from life. They're about engaging with it on terms that don't leave you drained. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule an empire by chasing validation. He anchored himself in principles that made the chaos around him irrelevant. Let's be clear, Stoicism isn't resignation. It's the opposite. When you stop chasing the wind, you free up energy to build what matters. Consider the archer again. They don't obsess over the bullseye. They focus on their stance, their breath, the alignment of their shot. The target might sway in the wind, but their discipline doesn't. That's the heart of these moves. They transform frantic striving into deliberate action. You're not giving up, you're waking up to the levers you've always held but never pulled. Now, here's your challenge. Don't let this be just another video you watch and forget. Progress starts with a single step. Maybe today you'll pause before reacting to a rude comment, remembering that your peace isn't tied to others' words. Or perhaps you'll journal tonight, untangling where you've been chasing shadows instead of substance. Even the smallest practice, like asking, "Is this mine to control?" When stress hits, can reroute years of conditioned panic. The Stoics didn't write for applause, they wrote for action. So tell us in the comments which move resonates with you right now. Is it negative visualization, stripping the power from your fears, or amor fati, embracing obstacles as fuel? Your choice isn't permanent, it's just the first thread you're pulling to unravel the chase. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, but every brick was laid with intention. Your unshakable life starts the same way, one Stoic move at a time.